My name is Douglas Parsons. I'm thrilled to be able to have tonight's guest with us, Cheyenne. Cheyenne is part of the Edmonton 2S Society, Two Spirit, and I'm looking forward to engaging with her in regards to her history and what it means to be Two Spirit, Indigiqueer, and all the other elements that make up her identity, where she began and where she is today. I've been talking to Cheyenne for many months now, and we've been preparing for today's episode. We've delayed it a few times just because that's the way life is, and we're here tonight to have a conversation. We are not going into tonight with any firm plans with that we have to cover A, B, C, or D. We're simply having a conversation like two friends would have. There's a lot that's happened in a few months that have opened the eyes for many people. Perhaps not opened the eyes for our Indigenous people. And if you notice, I said our Indigenous people. That's a mistake on my part. The Indigenous people. Because by saying the word our, that's a sense of belonging, or myself as a cisgendered white male, putting people into categories, groups, etc. So I'm learning my vocabulary and my changes are happening. Is that because of the last 2 months with the announcements of what has been taking place with our residential schools, with the children who have been found? Perhaps. Now's the time to listen. Now's the time to be, of course, open. And I'm thrilled to have been able to talk to Ashley Cardinal at the end of April. And I'm with Cheyenne tonight as well. It's a much needed topic, and I'm glad it's one that we're going to have. We're based here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And it's important for me to say that because I wish to acknowledge that I learn and work on Treaty 6 and Métis ancestral lands, the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous peoples. This is where we will strive to honor and transform our relationship with each other. I'm open to this conversation. I'm open to listen, and I'm hoping that you are going to take this journey as well. Before we get to all the topics of tonight, I do want to mention that 2 nights ago, I talked to Nancy Shadlock, a coming out coach from Calgary, Alberta. Her interview is now on our YouTube site, as well as all other sites where you collect your podcasts. If you are on YouTube and you like with what we were doing so far, press subscribe. That helps us so much. And if you're on a podcast site such as Apple Podcasts, leave a review. That helps us as well because Apple that changes the algorithms and makes sure that our 2S LGBTQ plus voices are heard. And we know that we need those voices to be heard. Next week, we have 2 guests here on Tales of the LGBTQ plus. The very first night is Tuesday, 7 p.m. We have Vicki Finley. She is a woman living in Red Deer. She has spent her life before not really thinking about the LGBTQ plus community. But then one day she realized that 2 of her children became part of our rainbow community. And she quickly noticed that she had to have pride, not prejudice. So next Tuesday, we're going to listen to a mother's journey where she's learned to accept the world around her and to always lead with love. We also have a very special guest next Thursday, which will be at noon, giving noon a try to see if people like that time. We'll announce more about that later on. But enough of all that. Let us bring in our featured guest for tonight, Cheyenne. When you're here, there's a comment section. Please leave comments. Please ask questions, and we'll make sure at it as the night goes along. So without further ado, Cheyenne, welcome finally to Tales of the LGBTQ+. How are you doing tonight, my dear?
I'm wonderful. Yeah, I'm super well. I'll let you know I have a tiny bit of lag on my end. Sometimes it kind of stalls out a little bit, just so you know.
Yeah, and it's going to happen with technology. Don't worry about that. We just smile, and then that glitch will be rid of soon. Hopefully, if it does freeze, it catches us with our right face. I think Barbara Streisand has the right side, and I'm not sure what mine is. So whatever I can do to hide my chins.
I embrace the chins.
Yeah, exactly. You never know on a body where you can hide the extra Dorito bits. And I'm always excited to find those bits later on. Hey, enough about this in that regards. Cheyenne, I know, and I don't know why, but it's the worry for myself in mispronouncing your last name that I'm hesitant. So when I've been doing advertisements for you or when I've been talking to people, I've gone with your first name. And so now everybody knows you as a Madonna, a Cher type person, because you're simply Cheyenne. So Cheyenne, please introduce yourself to the world of Tales of the LGBTQ+.
Tanse, Cheyenne Mihko Kihêw ni Indigatson. Amiskuchiwas kahaiganok tinia. So I just introduced myself in my traditional language, which is Nihiawewin or Cree. I'm a Nihiaw mixed settler. I said, basically, my name is Cheyenne Mihko Kihêw. Mihko Kihêw means blood eagle in Cree. And Amiskuchiwas kahaigan is the place that we are currently located and where I was born and raised. And my pronouns are they, them, and she, her. I like to use both of them alternate. If alternating is too hard, just they, them.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to pronouns, that's been a discussion within the community and, of course, with our straight allies or our not straight allies. The pronouns with they and them, why do you use them? And why is it important for people to use the correct pronouns when talking to you or with someone else who uses a pronoun that may be unfamiliar in a conversational context?
Yeah, so I think sometimes people overthink pronouns a little bit. Like all a pronoun is just how we're referring to someone in a sentence. And it's actually kind of automatic sometimes. And that's where the adjustments come in, right? When we've known somebody for a long time, like a lot of my friends have known me as she, her, but when I came out as gender diverse, suddenly I realized that she, her doesn't always resonate with me. So I use they, them because it's a little closer to my cultural roots. So in the Cree language, all of our language is not gendered. We have like animate and inanimate, and that's how we refer to things. And so pronouns aren't really a thing within our language. But within the Cree culture, we actually have 8 different genders. So we still recognize that diversity within the genders. But our language itself isn't gendered. So it's a little bit complicated. And so I find myself like as an in-between person or as a person who's neither a man nor a woman, they, them just resonates really well with me. But I also really love like being feminine. And so like as a femme person, I still use she, her as well. But I just like people to alternate because it acknowledges that I am an in-between person and that's important to me. And it's hard for some of my friends, I think, in my family who are getting to know me now as a two-spirit person and not the person they knew before. And I appreciate the effort that a lot of them are making to honor those. And it can be hard to adjust your language sometimes. But it's suicide prevention, it's care, it's all sorts of ways of honoring the person that you're talking to or talking about. And so if we use the right pronouns for them, we're recognizing who they are as an individual. But it shouldn't be up to gender diverse folks to use pronouns and normalize pronouns. Cisgendered people also need to support that. Otherwise, it's just us out here outing ourselves every time we say our pronouns. And really, that's what it is. I come out every time I say they, them, right? So yeah, that's my little pronoun spiel.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I love also when you described yourself as an in-between person. That's an incredible set of words with each other because there could be a lot of meaning within that. I know you before this as being part of the Edmonton Two Spirit Society. So Two Spirit is something that I've, of course, attached to you. I've heard the words Indigiqueer from a conversation with Ashley Cardinal that I had when she was our 5th guest on this podcast. And so, Cheyenne, can you tell me more about what it means to be two-spirit, Indigiqueer, or as you just mentioned here, in between?
Yeah, so those are kind of all similar but different. The idea of being two-spirit is actually quite complex, and it's really personal. It depends on what nation you come from, and what teachings are within that nation. And so for me, being two-spirit means that both my gender and my sexuality are not what is quote-unquote normal, for lack of a better term, right? I'm not heteronormative. I'm not heterosexual. I'm not cisgendered. And so I fall into this like space of transcending the binary. I don't see myself as falling within those categories. And I kind of never have. Even as a young child, like I was the quote unquote tomboy, and we didn't have the language then that I know now to describe myself. And even still, I'm a learner. Like I like to really emphasize that I'm not a knowledge carrier. I'm not an elder. I'm very new in my cultural journey as a two-spirit person. And so a lot of the information that I'm sharing is just what I've received along my journey. And I'm grateful for the stuff that I've learned, but I still have lots more learning to do. So yeah, being two-spirit, there's this assumption that all two-spirit people are queer or trans, or that all queer and trans Indigenous people identify as two-spirit, and that's not true. There could be people who identify as two-spirit who don't see themselves as part of the rainbow spectrum, and that's part of their own journey and whatever their nation's teachings are. And so two-spirit really is meant to be a placeholder term. It was developed, it came out of a pipe ceremony for an elder named Myra Laramie in 1989. And in 1990, there was a group of two-spirit elders, gender and sexually diverse elders, who came together at a conference and decided that there needed to be a term that our community could use as a placeholder while we reconnect to our traditional languages and we reconnect with these teachings that were lost to colonization. And I know our conversation is going to naturally kind of progress into that impact, but I think that's a good place to start. Of like, the term two-spirit itself was never meant to be the be-all, end-all, because we recognize that there's a really big diversity of gender and sexual diverse folks across the nation and across Turtle Island. So for me, I'm still learning what two-spirit means to me. I know that it means that I do a lot of work in the community, and I've always been really drawn to that kind of work. And I think that stems out of whatever teachings are still to come to me around what my gender is, and the roles that are my responsibilities of whatever my gender is. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer to say that whoever you talk to, two-spirit is going to be a little different. It's never going to be exactly the same answer.
Yeah. Just now you mentioning two-spirit not meant to be the all-encompassing. That's something new to myself as well. That's not something that I was aware of. So that adds to my learning. I'm going to do a little talking here, but Cheyenne, we're getting a little bit of an echo with the microphone. Would you be able to adjust that microphone a little bit?
I'm just using AirPods, so I don't know.
If you're not, don't worry.
Yeah, sorry. I just have AirPods in.
Yeah, no worries. There's nothing to be sorry about. When we were talking before, in writing, I mentioned the word two-spirited, and putting it into a sentence. Oh, I would love for you to talk about how you are two-spirited. You very nicely corrected me when it came to this, and you see, because it reflects upon yourself. Can you tell us more about two-spirited and why that ED at the end doesn't necessarily work for you today.
Yeah, so it's the same way that we wouldn't call a trans person transgendered. It implies that we're describing like who they are and that it wasn't like an inherent part of their identity. And that's the same thing for being two-spirit. And again, there's a lot of two-spirit folks that still use two-spirited. And that's just for me personally. I think that we're born two-spirit. We are gifted this element of our being before we're even born. And so when we come onto the earth, we're born two-spirit. We don't like develop. Yeah, it's a little hard to describe, but essentially it's reflecting more of our identity as being inherently who we are and not just a descriptive, I guess.
Yeah, you're not a verb.
Yeah, I'm not
an identity that's created. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. As an English person, as an English teacher, that's greatly. And when you were talking before about the words and identification, I know that 2021 is this year with a lot of great things happening, a lot of terrible things happening, but conversation has been coming forth, which is long coming. And I know that the vocabulary words that we will be using 10 years from now may not have been invented yet, or we're not using those words yet. So it's exciting but scary at the same time. But it's wonderful that we're being able to be who we are and be able to shout that out. I want to come back to your last name.
Yeah.
Your last name, was this a last name that you were born with, or is this a last name that you were able to gain, obtain, have anointed on you at a later time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm really proud of my name, and I get a lot of flack sometimes with the Indigenous community for using my name in the way that I do. So when I was born, I was actually born Cheyenne Workman, and it was not a last name I ever resonated with. It was like my mom's ex-husband's name, who's not my biological father. I don't actually know my biological father. He's like some sort of white, which is of the same vein in that I don't take claim to generic whiteness. There's not a culture in that. So that's why I really stick to my Indigenous roots, because I can like really see that culture like thriving in front of me. And so I was born really outside of my culture, not really raised with language or in ceremony or on the land. I grew up in the city. My family's from Dripal Cree Nation, but we didn't really grow up out there. We'd go for the odd round dance or powwow, but we never learned about the dances. We never got to participate in rites of passage ceremonies or naming ceremonies. And so I grew up my whole life just as Cheyenne Workman, always never connecting to that name and knowing it wasn't really who I was. And so while I was at school at McEwen University, I had the chance to meet a really amazing knowledge carrier named Roxanne Tatusis, who I absolutely adore. She does a lot of work with Indigenous queer parents, two-spirit parents of two-spirit kiddos, being that she also has offspring who are two-spirit. And so she brought me into a naming ceremony, and I received Mihko Kihêw as my name, and which means blood eagle woman. But at that time I was questioning my gender, so the Esqueo didn't really resonate with me. And so I really wanted to graduate university with a name that wasn't Workman. It was really important for me to hear a name that was of my Indigenous heritage when I walked across the stage in my moccasins. And so I sat with Roxanne Tatusis, and we had a lot of really frank conversations about my name. And we determined that it would be acceptable that I took it as a legal name. And so there's actually a process in Alberta, I'm not sure if you're aware, where Indigenous people can reclaim their traditional names for free. I didn't know that at the time, so I paid a lot of money. But if you're Indigenous and you want to change your name, it's free in Alberta, and there's a way to do it. Bearpaw Legal has a really amazing resource on how to change your name. So that's how my name came to be. I dropped the Esqueo because I don't resonate with it. But I'm still looking forward to having potentially another name. And the thing is, with our ceremonial names or our given names, they're not like earned. We're given those names when we're born. When we enter this earth, that's like our name that is there waiting for us. And so we go and we receive it. And I think, there's different teachings around how and when to use it. And some folks feel like it's uncomfortable that I use it as a legal name, but for me, it's very empowering, and I have had nothing but pride since I took it. So.
Yeah. So for yourself, you speak with a lot of pride with your culture. Has it always been that way with you? Have you always tapped into your Indigenous culture, especially when you're going through issues and difficulties? Or is this something that you discovered later on with your life when all of a sudden everything opened up and you went, I need this. This is what I need in my life to survive and to thrive. When did this happen for you?
Yeah, no, it wasn't always this way. I was always kind of like felt on the outside of my culture. Like my grandmother spoke fluent Nihiawe fluent Cree, but we never really learned it. And I never asked those important questions from her. And it's one of my biggest regrets in my life is that I didn't really grow up knowing my grandfather. And so we'd see him at the odd powwow, but both my grandparents were residential school survivors. And so just a content warning, like I'm going to talk about a little bit about colonial violence and personal violence at many points through this podcast. So if that's uncomfortable for folks, you might want to step away. But so both my grandparents were residential school survivors, and there was a lot that they experienced in the schools that they never talked to us about. But we saw the pain and we saw the trauma, and it was passed down through our family. So I grew up in a very violent household. And so we didn't really have our culture. Like I said, they had round dance or powwow, but it wasn't like I need to smudge when I'm feeling bad, or I need to go into the land when I need to reconnect. It wasn't really like that for me. But I went to a really amazing high school called the Boyle Street Education Center. And I'm the current chair of the board of directors now. That's how much I believe in the school. And they have a very strong Indigenous focus within their building. And so I had the opportunity to connect with ceremony a little bit more, and then through MacEwan University, which is kind of ironic because I'm in this like Western academic setting, and here I am making drums and going to round dances and sweats and receiving teachings. And so I was really grateful for QOSC, which is the Indigenous Education Center, for helping me really connect. And this job with E2S now is just the greatest privilege I could ever ask for as a Two-Spirit Indigenous person, to have a job where I'm paid to explore my identity and support others in their journey. So it hasn't always been this way, but it's a very strong part of my life within the last 10 years for sure.
Yeah, and let's just briefly mention the job with E2S, Edmonton Two-Spirit Society. Cheyenne is the community liaison. She works with doing community education and engagement. She is a knowledge carrier. Stake engagement she takes part in, the mental health support, as well as the social media and events. So there's a lot of aspects that you are involved in. What do you find to be the most rewarding day to day in this career, especially with Edmonton Two-Spirit Society?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a completely different job before. I was working for HIV Edmonton, and that was like rewarding in a whole other sense. So it's like really awesome to be able to talk openly about sexual health with people and like encourage them to take health in their own hands. And this job is just so different. You know, I think one of the most rewarding aspects is getting to connect with different Two-Spirit people and really developing a strong network of support and guidance. And like, I have a ceremonial family now that I didn't really have before after I left MacEwan. And so like knowing that there's these people out there who have similar stories or who can hold space for the struggles that we face as Two-Spirit people, and like a lot of the unilateral violence that we experience within Indigenous communities as well. We have our kin who are there to guide us and support us, and more elders than I've ever had the chance of knowing. And that's, again, one of the greatest privileges. And so I think, and just like being able to support other people who are on this journey, and everybody's at a different space, and it's just nice to hold it for them and be there for them and learn alongside with them. And you called me a knowledge carrier, and I was like, oh, that feels real intense. Like, I don't know if I would call myself a knowledge carrier yet. But I'm learning, and I'm offering my protocol, and I'm doing what I can. We just came back from being on the land and receiving Two-Spirit songs and smoking a Two-Spirit pipe together and picking medicines. And that's my job. And I just can't, like, I'm humbled by it. It makes me emotional, actually, that that's something that exists for Two-Spirit people. And I hope that more people across Turtle Island get opportunities like this, where not only can they financially support themselves, but they're doing so in this environment that is authentically themselves. And it's just, yeah, every day it's a really great privilege to have the job that I do.
Yeah. From my understanding before with the Two-Spirit people within communities is that there was an elevation at times of the Two-Spirit person knowledge. They had a background in some ways they were very revered as keepers of knowledge, because they were able to tap into aspects. Of course, we know as well, because the world that we live in is very cruel many times, that our Two-Spirit people, and again I said our rather than the Two-Spirit people, ostracized, or there was pushback against. Where do you see the Two-Spirit people today, here in 2021, and moving forward in the future? What do you see as the role that the person will be able to take on?
Yeah, I think it's important before looking at like the resurgence movement to kind of understand why the resurgent movement is even happening. That, like you mentioned, you know, that we did hold a special space within our communities. And again, like a lot of this stuff is that you would exchange tobacco for and to have these conversations with. So I won't go like too into depth into stuff, but you know, it really depends on what nation you're going to and how they worked with their Two-Spirit people. But there was always at least a space for us within our circles, our ceremonies, the way we were allowed to engage with men and women who had very specific roles as well in their societies. You know, there was always a space for us. And that changed when the settlers arrived. And it's really important to recognize the role that residential schools played within the erasure of Two-Spirit people, because we can't talk about where we are now without looking at where we were then, and how we were basically just like pushed underground. And there was, so when residential schools kind of happened, there was the introduction of really like rigid gendered spaces. So all of a sudden, all that gender and sexual diversity that we knew existed, there's Indigenous languages that show us that we had diversity within the different communities. But then residential schools happened, and suddenly it's like boys here, girls here. You wear this, you wear that. You're not allowed to have your hair long. You're not allowed to speak your language. So it's impossible to be a gender or sexual diverse person when you're in such a rigid space like that. That's oftentimes religion played a big role in that as well. With settlers came social constructs that just did not exist in our communities. So even though we had a special spot, and in some communities we probably were revered and kind of held high, I think it's important to recognize that we were unfortunately erased with residential schools. And so when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission happened and there was all these calls to action, there's not one single mention of Two-Spirit people within any of those calls to action. And if you look at the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People, again, not one single mention of Two-Spirit people or gender and sexually diverse people. And so now there's an assumption that we're obviously included in that, but there needs to be specific language so that we can honor that resurgence movement that you were just asking about. And so now, since since the late 70s, there's been a big movement within our knowledge carriers and our elders particularly. As I mentioned, Myra Laramie, there's Albert McLeod, and Barbara Bruce, Sharp Doppler, a whole slew of really amazing Two-Spirit elders who wanted to ensure that these teachings were going to be brought back and that people had space in the circle. They could enter ceremony and wear what they want and sat where they want. But all of a sudden our ceremonial spaces didn't allow for that, because after residential schools kind of closed, there was all this trauma that was left over, and there was homophobia and transphobia. And so that's what we're battling now as Two-Spirit people within our own communities. So I think we see a lot of Two-Spirit people in caregiver roles. They're mediators. We see them as community support workers, such as myself. But there's Two-Spirit physicians. There's Two-Spirit psychologists. We're out there and we're thriving and doing all sorts of amazing work. And what we're really hoping is that more knowledge carriers and elders who have been impacted by trauma and hold some of these social constructs that didn't exist before, is helping them understand that we are still welcome, and really just making a space for us and saying, hey, like, if you don't have a spot for us, then we're just going to come and sit, and you're going to make space for us, because it's important that we're included, and that we always were included. But we also want to recognize not to put us on a pedestal as well. We are still human beings, and we don't want to be looked at as if we're some great higher power. And I'm sure some teachings might have that in some regard, but at least for me, I'm just a human. I'm just a real queer trans person who's trying to figure out my way in life, and my culture is a big part of that. So I think Two-Spirit people just need to have more opportunities to show that they exist and they are thriving. And there was a Two-Spirit woman that was just elected Grand Chief of the Mohawk community, and they've never had a queer or woman identifying person in that role. So like, we're out there and we're doing things, and it's really beautiful to see. We're all sorts of activists and community caregivers, and I think we just have lots of room to keep growing. Long answer, sorry.
Oh, no, never be sorry. No, that was wonderful. I was trained initially as a junior high school teacher. And I went through school in the mid-90s to get my first teaching degree. And my major is English and social studies, history. During my 4 years of school, we rarely touched upon any of the history for the Indigenous people, other than the Eurocentric coming in, taking over. There were times when they tried to say that it was a giving of the land or the sharing of the land. And, oh, there was a fight, but let's move on to page 27 and let's get to the other stuff. When I became a teacher, we had our materials, our curriculum, and still there was nothing there about residential schools. There was nothing about being Two-Spirit, anything about this other than food, some powwows, teepees, and we may have one special day at the school where we celebrate. Unfortunately, then that would be dressing in the clothes. And when you reflect upon that, how terrible that was. And so I come to this conversation astonished with myself, because I've always seen myself as an ally or somebody who is progressive. But I realize now that I did not know, nor did I know what type of questions to ask. I was aware that I did have power as myself, as being a cis white male, that there was power in myself being able to ask questions and to find out more. And so it's not necessarily guilt that I feel today. It's the awareness that I could have, should have done something. And that's where I come today with conversation, understanding more about with what happened and recognizing that there's going to be a lot of truth that's taking place, but it's not up to me to decide when reconciliation takes place and in what form. So I'm a listener. I'm gathering information. You mentioned your grandparents' residential school system. And because of that, you're only 2 generations away from that.
Yeah.
There would be some people that would say, that was your grandparents, that has nothing to do with you. But we know with psychology, we know this now, because I hope that we're asking the right questions to be aware. 2021, there's been a lot of news taking place with the residential schools, and there seems like we're having the conversations now. How moment with where we are at when it comes to awareness, education, and listening. Are we beginning to do it right, or are we messing this up?
That's a good question. I I guess it depends on who you talk to. I mean, it's been really hard for Indigenous people across the country who have direct lineage. And that's almost every Indigenous person across Turtle Island who has lineage of somebody who was in the school. And if I would have been born in a different place, even at that time I was born in 87, I could have ended up in a residential school. The last school closed in 1996. So it's actually not that far out. And like my grandparents, they raised their children not knowing how to love. My grandmother in particular was in St. Bernard's and Gruard for, I believe, 12 years or so. And so that whole time, we don't know what she experienced. She wouldn't talk about it, at least not very openly. There was some stories of furnaces and infants being thrown in furnaces when priests would have like sexual assaults against some of the young girls. And so like we heard some of those stories, but never her own personal ones. And there was like a lot of trauma there. And so I think now that we're having these conversations, it's a really good place to start. But there's, you know, we need more than an apology at this point, you know. There's a lot of folks that were engaged in these behaviors that are still alive. And there needs to be accountability for the folks that were alive. And it wasn't that long ago. So if we can hold war criminals responsible for their actions, then we need to recognize that this was a genocide. And until the United Nations allows us and supports Canada and it kind of says, hey, like if you look at the description of genocide from the United Nations, forcibly removing children from their homes is one of those key elements that like defines genocide. And Canada is still skirting around that word. And I think until we can call a spade, there's not really reconciliation that's going to happen. There's, you know, we're working on conciliation. I think at this point, we're developing a relationship. But when you have governments that aren't willing to teach the right education in school, or they're whitewashing our education, or, you know, there's an apology that's issued instead of drinking water, you know, that speaks volumes to where we're at. So there's a lot of work to happen. I think even just looking at like police brutality and looking at all the different issues, like young Indigenous females making up a huge percentage of our justice system. Like, why is that? Why aren't we talking about children's services? And, you know, we're still taking babies from their homes. If you look at the percentages across Canada of which children are in care, majority of them are Indigenous. So we're still taking babies from their home. There just looks a little differently. The residential school system is still functional. It's just taken on a different form. And so there's work to be done still, but conversations are happening and non-Indigenous allies are starting to come out of the woodworks. They're realizing all these stories that they've been maybe hearing or didn't even know were happening are true. And we have the bodies in the grounds to prove it. And that's really sad to say that, you know, schoolyards have graveyards, and that's not okay. So yeah, we've got work to do, but I think it's a slow process, and it's nice to see that conversations are happening.
Yeah, I talked to my sister, who is a woman who, of course, looks very similar to me, who has privilege. Our skin color gives us currency. And if she went missing, I know that would be all over the news. And here in Canada, we have over 1,200 named women, Indigenous women, and that conversation is one time a year when it comes to the media. And it's just a small snippet. So we've got a long way to go. But I do see a difference in the media a little, slowly. It's not fast enough. But I do see maybe some hope. But then again, that's my sunglasses. That's my cultural lens looking at everything, you know, and that's the terrible thing. I know the conversations have started a lot because we knew about the children, but until they mentioned the number, we were able to push that to the side a little bit. When I take a look at whatever culture that I'm part of, which isn't really a culture, but that's a conversation as well for a different time. But the numbers. And of course, these are only a few of the schools or the hospital here in Edmonton, Camsel, I believe it's called, more and more. Cheyenne, this is going to be a tough question for you, and I apologize. With the news almost every week of what is being discovered, how are you doing? How are you? The self-care? How are you doing?
Yeah, you're already crying.
It's okay. I've got tissues here myself. I'm going to join with you.
Crying. It's been a really hard couple of months. There was, when the first initial 215 were thrown in Kamloops, I went into a bit of a depressive episode. I didn't expect the visceral gut punch reaction that I had. A lot of what's been going on my mind every time that new announcement comes of a new site, it's like, what did my grandparents experience while they were there? And why do we, that's so lovely. Oh, I love you, E2S. Why did these tiny humans have to experience this? And I think that's really one of the big things that has been so hard, is these were just little babies, and you just took them from their home to what? To make sure that you were disrupting cultural continuity. That's just really pathetic that they attacked our children. And so it's been very hard to keep hearing stories and people casually talking about the schools. You see all these frames up on people's Facebooks, but you don't really understand. Unless you're Indigenous and you have a direct lineage, you're not going to know that pain. You're not going to know how it is to be re-traumatized every time the news comes on, and having to hear it and remember that your family has its own issues. You have your own issues. That I was born into grief, basically. I read that recently and it really resonated with me, that Indigenous people are born into grief and that we carry that grief every day of our lives. And when we don't even know sometimes that we're carrying it. And it's generational. And so for me, like you say, I'm only 2 generations out, and that is still really felt in our family. And I love my family, and some of us are starting to do that healing work, and it's really beautiful to see how we're growing and thriving. So I guess my self-care, to answer your question, because I'm rambling a little bit, it's a lot of doing my beadwork, smudging, and just sitting and feeling and letting myself cry and feel those emotions. And really the last couple of days spending time with my ceremonial family on the land, and getting to really just hold space for each other was really uplifting and rejuvenating. But every new discovery is a new trauma that's resurfaced. And so every time that a new announcement comes, we have to stop and hold space for that. And so it's hard when you're and it was Pride Month and Indigenous History Month. So we were doing our best to hold space for our grief, but knowing that we just had to work and make sure that we were doing what we needed to get done last month. And so at the end of the month, me personally, I crashed. I just collapsed into a mess for about a week because I needed to hold space for that pain that I was holding. So it's lots of tears, it's lots of smudging, sitting with our elders, having those conversations, and checking in with each other, making sure that we're doing okay. And sometimes you just shut down. You just need to sit and cry, and just disconnect. Because like I say, it's on the media constantly, and it's casually in the Facebook comments of, that wasn't even that long ago. Well, hi, neurodivergent with a lot of childhood trauma and violence. And that comes from my grandparents not knowing how to love. So yeah, it's been a difficult journey. It's been really hard to be honest, and just trying to hold space for my family as well. And yeah.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned, please define the word love as it means to you.
Oh, I mean, that's Love is just like this. Oh, it's so hard to describe love. I just love that there's like so many variations of love. There's so many different ways of loving people. And I'm polyamorous, so like I really believe in all different kinds of love. The love is like authentically seeing people for who they are and accepting that sometimes they're going to make mistakes and accepting the humanity in them, and seeing that humanity, but also like holding space and helping them learn and grow. And I think that there's love in guiding people to help them be the best themselves that they can be. And that's really like a motto that I try to live behind, is like, I always try to aspire to inspire. And that's like, comes from me just holding love for people and like wanting to, just wanting to hold space, I guess. For me, love is like, it's a whole bunch of different things. It's, the way we have sexual love with people, the way we have platonic love, like my best friend who just said she loves me, so there's the Cree word, is Tagitoin, and if we're saying I love you to somebody, it's Kisagitin. And so I just like, I see love as sacred and traditional and, just beautiful.
Yeah. It's difficult for myself as being a cis white interviewer at this moment, in that I want to reach through the screen and give you the biggest hug and love and be able to look you in the eyes and say, whatever you need, whatever that is, I'm here for you. But at the same time, I need you at this moment to be that knowledge carrier, that teacher, because there's a lot of people who are going to be watching this later on who come to this conversation with the education that I had, with what I learned to understand. And you mentioned the space and needing that time. I don't even know how to phrase this correctly. For myself, who understands that I have privilege, I have a platform, I can elevate voices, what can I do to be able to make sure that the truth is heard? I am not taking over the conversation, because I could do that because people will listen to me, but I'm allowing the voices that need to be heard to be heard. Long way to go there. But how can we do this in everyday life and be effective?
Yeah, I mean, like a big example is like you are allowing us a platform to tell our stories. And that's really important because a lot of times the stories aren't heard. And especially for Two-Spirit people, like we're just so underground for a lot of communities, and like even in our own spaces, they don't recognize us. And it's like really hard to go to a ceremony and be told that you're not welcome there because you have a vagina, but you like want to dress like a man, and all of a sudden you're not welcome. Like, so like it's, giving us a platform to tell these stories and in a way that makes sense to us. And that's going to be different depending on who you talk to, because, we all have different ways of expressing ourselves. And really just like allowing us to exist without doing all the emotional labor and the support continually, right? It's like really hard. And I don't mean this as shade towards anybody who has reached out to me. So if there's somebody watching who's like, oh, I did that, oops. I don't mean it to be like that, but like, especially with the residential school findings, it's a lot of people like messaging and asking really hard questions that I don't necessarily have the space to answer. And like, there's some questions that, you have to go directly to an Indigenous person, but there's also a lot of research out there, and there's a lot of books and articles written by Indigenous people. And so we've put our emotional labor already out into the world. And so before asking a really hard question of somebody, doing your work on your end to see what is out there. And if you really do need to see an Indigenous person and have their voice raised, then you need to pay them for that labor. So the first thing I would always recommend is if you're coming to us with questions, always bring that tobacco. Always start it off in a good way. Bring an offering to an Indigenous person, and make sure that you're understanding why you're presenting that tobacco. And so we offer protocol to show our intentions of why we're working with you and what it is that your question is, or what it is that your request is. And so the Indigenous person, just because you offered protocol, they can choose to not work with you in that regard. That's still their right, and you can't like hold that against them if they choose not to honor your request. And most, I'm not going to speak for all Indigenous peoples because we're such a diverse group, we're not homogenous, right? And I'm just like, again, I'm one guy, I'm not an elder or a knowledge carrier, but you know, I say we just like really, if you're asking them to do stuff, pay them, give them a platform to do their work, and ask what they need. Ask each person, if you have to, what do they need? How can you support? Because again, I won't ever speak for all Indigenous people because we're such a broad group of folks. But for me personally, that's what I ask of my friends and my family is like, if you're asking me to do emotional labor, or if you're asking me very cultural questions, recognizing that you're asking me to share generations of knowledge that I still am learning. And so there needs to be a level of commitment to receive that knowledge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. While we've been talking during this entire interview, I'm also looking behind you and seeing the pride flag with traditional Indigenous aspect added to it. When you see that, Cheyenne, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, this is the Two-Spirit flag. It's the general flag that we use. There's different variations of it, like a trans version. But yeah, this is our flag that we use in the Two-Spirit community. And you know, we at E2S, we have our banner now that we've made, and we've added the progressive pride flag colors to it as well. So you know, adding the blue the brown and the black, and then the trans colors. So yeah, that's just a symbol of just my pride as a Two-Spirit person, as an Indigiqueer person. You know, recognizing that I fall under gender diversity, but that also I'm super queer, and you know, the rainbow kind of honors that.
Yeah, I'm going to just mention a few things from our comment section for the people who will be listening to the audio later on. Someone from the Edmonton Two-Spirit Society mentioned that at E2S, our community staff and members are thankful Cheyenne has risen to carry the flame in advocating and caring for our two spirits. They share an intense love for the healing and resurgence of our culture and traditions. To know more about Cheyenne, as part of E2S, has recently released an educational video series that we also began our Two-Spirit community education program with our new hire Assisi Thiessen Kutinayu as educator. I was looking at this educational video series, education program. As a teacher, tell me more about this.
Yeah, so we actually have a series of 3 videos. They're on our YouTube channel. If you look up Edmonton Two-Spirit Society here on YouTube, you'll find the videos. We have a playlist called Two-Spirit Knowing. And so it's 3 short videos. You can watch all 3 in under a half an hour. I believe it's just over 20 minutes to watch all 3 of them. And so the first 2 videos honor the voices of our elders and our knowledge carriers. So we have a couple of Two-Spirit knowledge carriers, as well as other ally elders, that basically talk about Two-Spirit knowledge and history. They touch on the 8 genders very briefly, and they share their own experiences as the Two-Spirit people. We have our resident elder, Ed LaValle, with his partner, Lloyd, of 20 years, and they share a nice little kiss on camera, and it's like the most wholesome thing ever, because you just don't see queer Indigenous love. You don't see it in the media. Like, you very rarely see queer Indigenous young love on the media, never mind our elders. So yeah, it's a really powerful couple of videos with our knowledge carriers. And then the third video is myself, my colleagues Jeff, Sissy, and some of our board members talking again about our experiences as being Two-Spirit and how we're really not alone. We found this community that's just thriving and beautiful and really amazing to be a part of. So yeah, the videos talk about that. And the community education series the community education program. So that's myself, Sissy, and then my colleague Jeff also does some of the education stuff as well. Sissy will go into schools on and off reserve, working specifically with like GSAs and K to 12, and possibly I think some universities and stuff as well, but kind of primarily focusing on K to 12. And they're focusing specifically on Two-Spirit education. So what it means to be Two-Spirit, some of that history and the resurgence movement. And with my education, I'm really grateful that I've received a lot of teachings from Gabe Calderon, who was our former board treasurer. And so they have their own consulting company and they work with all of you. And they've been teaching me some of their workshops. So I've been honored to kind of make some of them my own. So I offer Two-Spirit workshops as well as decolonization, Indigenous sexuality, healthy relationships, anti-oppression, that sort of thing. So we offer a pretty wide variety. And it's on like a sliding scale. If you're a small community organization, or if you're even just an individual or a family looking for that education, or if you're like a big business and corporation, depending on where you're at, we have a sliding scale for our fees as well. So, and all the monies that we receive from our community education go straight back into our programming. So we're really excited that we are able to offer these teachings. But again, I always like to say I'm not an elder or a knowledge carrier, and I'm still a learner. So doing these presentations also aids in my learning and my knowledge and growth as well. So yeah, people can reach out to us via our website, e2s.ca, and they can sign up or send us an email with a request for any sort of presentations that they have.
Nice. Back in the month of June for Pride Month, I did a series of Instagram chats with people for 15, 20 minutes. And you can find those chats on Tales of the LGBTQ plus Instagram page. And during one of the conversations, I did receive exclusive news that had not been said to the public at that time. But we kept it hush hush, and it gets mentioned here as well. And I'm going to bring this up here on the screen now because it has been mentioned that E2S does have their very first own offices on Beaver Hills House Park. What does that mean to you to finally have your very first and your very own office?
Yeah, it's super exciting. I know, and we just wanted to do a live announcement on Indigenous Peoples Day, so it's totally fine that Ashley had let it slip. We're all. I think it just goes to show how excited that we all were that we got the space. You know, it kind of sucked being a queer Indigenous serving organization and not having a space on Indigenous land. And like, this is our home, and yet we are like, you know, essentially unhoused. We had a space at the Pride Center, and we're super grateful for our relationship with the Pride Center. We have lots of love for the folks there, but we really did need a space for us to like flourish and grow. And so Beaver Hills House Park has a special significance for our community as well. And so we're just really grateful that we're just a beautiful office space overlooking the park. And we're in the works now of what our grand opening is going to look like. So follow our social medias to see when that event's going to be. But really, it's a chance for us to have ceremonies. It's a chance for us to have our beading and our other cultural activities in person. And we're going to do a mural project as well with Lance Cardinal. We've got a lot of love for Lance. If you don't know him, he's an amazing local Two-Spirit artist. And he's going to help some of our youth learn all about these murals. And we're going to have one up on display in our new office. So lots of big things coming. And it just signifies the growth. Myself being one of the very first staff, and my colleague Jeff we're the very first two staff. And we just have lots of love for the board who laid the foundational work for us to get us to the point of having this office. So, you know, big shout out to all the people who were involved in E2S prior to Jeff and I, who got us to this point. And now we're just trying to take their work and run with it. And the office gives us that opportunity.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great. And if there happened to be an invite to the grand opening, I don't know what I'm saying. Hey, we do have a question on the comments section here. Shannon asks, can you drop registration for those workshops?
Yeah, we don't really have registration. They're kind of by request. So if folks would like to learn more about these workshops and have them come into your space, just shoot me an email, communityliaison@edmonton2s.com, or just check out our website, e2s.ca, and you can request those specific workshops. And we can also tailor make some workshop as well within reason.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier just how overwhelming the month of June was, in particular with it being Indigenous History Month, combined with Pride Month. There's so much going on. And then when we learn more and more about residential schools, we have these summer months opening up now. We're able to be out and about a little bit. With activities that we can be a part of, or what are some of the things that you are looking forward to when it comes to your community and your own learning?
Yeah, we have our International Two-Spirit Gathering coming up at the end of August. So that's going to be announced within the next week or so. So again, watch our socials. Lots of beading activities and opportunities for us to be out on the land. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about summer is we just have a lot happening. And so, yeah, I think I just am really looking forward to being able to connect with my team more, connect with the community more. And now that things are open, we can have ceremony together, and that's just super exciting. So I'm looking forward to sweat lodges, and I'm looking forward to being on the land with our community. And I'm just looking forward to some camping for myself as well, and time with my bestie, and all those nice summery things that happen. So yeah, I just feel really excited about where the next few months are going, and yeah.
Yeah. So despite the horror of what's taking place, there is the good, there is the grounding that's taking place for yourself, in particular, that you are finding your space, you're finding your voice. And that's what's exciting. It just, even in the few months that I've gotten to know you through Facebook and through our chats, I see that I see it. Whatever that it is, I see it. And I see you. I see you and I recognize you. We're using this as a visual. And again, I come back to the people who will be listening to this later on in audio. To learn more about Edmonton's Two-Spirit Society on Facebook, simply look up Edmonton Two-Spirit Society. On Instagram, it's at Edmonton_2_spirit_society. And on Twitter, it's at E2S_2. I'll make sure that I include this information in the show notes to make sure that if you're interested in learning more, especially about the education videos, and especially if yourself, you are Two-Spirit, Indigiqueer, you're looking for that connection, you're looking for that understanding. From everyone that I've met at E2S, this is the place that you need to be. It's arms open wide, and it's incredible the work that's being done. Cheyenne, we are coming near the end of our conversation. We could talk for a long, long time, but I do have to go back to that education piece and with what has been taking place. What do you want to see when it comes to government acknowledgement, support, both federally, provincially, municipally, over the next few months?
Yeah, accountability is the biggest thing. We don't need half-faced apologies. We need policy change. We need there to be dismantling systems of oppression that continue to have barriers against us. We need to have land defenders and water defenders have their work be honored. All of these pipelines that are being pushed through Indigenous lands, that needs to stop. We need to recognize that people are hurting. We need to address systemic racism within our healthcare system. We need to stop taking children and putting them in different homes so that they're disconnected from their culture. So there needs to be like a recognition from Children Family Services that things have to change. There needs to be a recognition and actual policy change. Like, and these are things that like aren't going to happen overnight. And I recognize they're like big asks, but it's the only way that we're going to see any sort of equity within our country for Indigenous people. If we're not willing to count out, like call out this stuff in our government, then we're not going to see any change. And I'm just going to say this as myself, an individual, not as a representative E2S. The provincial government is pushing curriculums through that erase our identities, and like that has to stop. That cannot happen. We cannot have this whitewashed version of what it means to be Indigenous, because that's how we have like racism just be perpetuated. Our education system is failing Indigenous people. Our healthcare system is failing Indigenous people. And if you're a two-spirit person, it's extra hard. So like, what if you're trying to have parents? I have a two-spirit couple that I'm friends with who are having a hard time with their family journey now, and so there's all these different changes that need to happen. And I think behind all of it is accountability. It's people being able to say, hey, we are not doing things right. And we have all these calls to action, but what's happening with them? We need to honor the TRC. We need to honor our unhoused community. We need to honor the folks who were survivors of residential schools who are out there struggling.
I really notice, most of all, more than words, it's your spirit. And it goes back to you mentioning your last name, your legal last name, and your pride that goes with that name. I'm really proud and happy that we've finally been able to have this time with each other. It's making sure that I'm accountable, not with what I say necessarily, but keeping myself open and not jumping in and doing the typical teacher thing of being a devil's advocate, because that's a teacher's thing. But it's keeping in mind the fact that the devil has been at work for many years now, undercover for generations, and the devil doesn't need an advocate. So there's times to shut up and to ask questions and to listen. So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you tonight, Cheyenne, and that puts a lot of weight on your shoulders, because it's that expectation. But you're good at it. You're good at it, and there's that part of it that it's like, once you're good at something like this, with sharing yourself and making yourself vulnerable, you're allowing people like myself and for our listeners to understand in the way that we can, and not just turn the channel or turn the page, but to get right into the heart of the issue. And you lead with heart, and your pride bursts through at all times. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cheyenne,
I appreciate it.
I'm speaking the truth. Cheyenne, are there any last words that you want to share with our listeners tonight?
I guess like if you're Indigenous and you're questioning and you're not sure what your space is, like please reach out to us. We're here to support and love you. And like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Like, I just really want like all those Indigenous, queer, and trans folks out there, and like, knowing that you're loved and you're valid and you're worthy, and like you have a space in our circle. And if you're struggling and you're looking for support, please reach out to us. We offer suicide intervention and mental health supports. We have counseling available, and like with two-spirit psychologists. So if you need mental health support, please reach out to E2S. We are here. We're ready to take your call and provide you with the support that we can, or at the very least, get you the resources that you might need. So if you're not Indigenous and you're queer and trans, you're loved and valued too. And we all have a spot on this earth, and we're all here for a reason. And there is a lot of division, I think, sometimes between like white and Indigenous, and like we need to recognize that like Indigenous people have a space, but that we're also like we're kin regardless, and we need to support and love each other and lift each other up. And it's really important that we keep doing that. So just recognizing that you're special and you're beautiful, and I love you. And I think that's it. Yeah.
It's beautiful. 3 weeks ago, there was the the get together at the legislature. And that night, I was able to meet Ashley Cardinal, one of your colleagues, that night. And on a very sad night, it was a night when we were able to hug for a long time, embrace, and it was very memorable to me. I cannot wait for the time, Cheyenne, because I have a big bear hug waiting for you. And
I'm ready. I'm so ready for it.
It's with a lot of love, understanding, but this embrace that through this podcast, I've been able to meet these incredible people who have never had their stories written down on paper before. And through this platform, be able to share their stories with everybody. I'm honored that you are here with us tonight and everybody who's been with us so far and into the future. Cheyenne, you'll be with us. Brian here. Cheyenne is amazing. Glad I am and teaching us. Yeah. So before we wrap up, if this is your first time listening to Tales of the LGBTQ+, thank you very much for taking the time to listen. We have a number of other stories as well going across our huge rainbow community. We're sharing the stories that have never been told before. It's our own personal stories. And it's wonderful to hear. So if you like what you've seen, regardless of the cat and regardless of the malfunctioning, do press subscribe, or if you're on the different platforms, do leave a review, and do take the opportunity to hear other stories as well. Ashley Cardinal is about episode number 5, so you'll have to go back a little bit, take a listen as well. You'll get other parts of the story, and that's fantastic. Next week, I have Vicky Finley next Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Mountain. I will have my door closed. The conversation will be about herself as a straight woman who did not really understand the community before, but then her children came out of the closet. One of her children happens to be transgender, another non-binary, and now she's leading with pride, not prejudice. So we're going to hear her story as well. In the next few weeks as well, we have Vince Spinato, who is a very well-known fragrance designer for Jennifer Lopez, Victoria Beckham, and others. Last month, his good friend Lorna Luft and Liza Minnelli announced that Vince will be creating the perfume that celebrates the 100th birthday of their mother, Judy Garland. So Vince will be here on July 20th to have that conversation with us as well. He's got a book. If you want to read the book, just reach out to me because I've got the book. I can send it your way. There's also a documentary later on. And near the end of the month, we begin conversations about the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose. They've been here for over 40 years. Drag queens raising money for a community. Over $1 million have gone towards scholarships, HIV awareness. We're going to begin the history of, and there's a lot of stories when it comes to drag queens. And just to let people know, they don't mention the very first emperor that they had. You want to know why? Find out at the end of the month, and I'll let you know then. Or you can send me a personal message, and I'll let you know then as well. Long story short, lots of things going on. I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to have voices like Cheyenne here. So once again, Cheyenne, much love. I love you to pieces. I am smitten once again, falling in love with people one interview at a time. On behalf of Cheyenne, thank you all for listening to this episode of Tales of the LGBTQ+, letting you all know to be good and always text when you get home. Until next time, everybody.